Hey, it's me. I'm back with part 2. My series on my cult life. So if you haven't seen part 1, go watch part 1. Part 2 will make a lot more sense. Part 2, I'm going to try and get through. It's going to be rough, but you can do this. I actually wrote a lot of stuff down because it's hard not to get sidetracked very easily, especially when you're talking about things like this. I guess I kind of want to, now part 3 is going to be all about Jesus Camp. If you know what Jesus Camp is, then you know what you're about to get. If you don't know what Jesus Camp is, I envy you a lot. Part 4 will probably be how I got out of the cult and things that happened after. I think the cult probably set me up for a lot of things that happened later on. So, let's get on this. So, last time we talked about how I got in. And, you don't wake up in the morning thinking, oh, I'm going to go join a cult today. Because that's not it. That's not what happens. You really don't actually know that you're in a cult until much later. And you start to, you're forced to reevaluate everything you ever thought and every idea you ever had. And you start wondering, was this my idea? Or was this put in my head? Was this someone else's idea? How did I get here? Who am I? It happens. In a cult, it's kind of like, you've seen Goodfellas, that scene where Henry's wife is at the party with all the other guys' wives, and she says that we only ever see each other, and it's totally normal. That's how it was. Being different was very bad. No one had a TV, so it was normal. People that had a TV were weird. No one listened to music, so unless it was the Christian stuff they played at church. So people who listened to music were weird. You're supposed to stay away from them. It's like my mom got yelled at one time because she let me watch Scooby-Doo. And this is 70s version Scooby-Doo. There's no monsters. She got yelled at for that. It wasn't... it's nothing. But to them, she disobeyed. She deserved to be punished. You're only ever around the cult. You're only ever around those same people. Every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday, every Saturday, every Thursday, every Tuesday, there's some sort of something going on. There's a class, there's a dinner, there's a party, there's something. So you're always busy, you're always doing it, and you're always there. Because they don't want you to not be there. They don't want you to be away, to have time to think, to be out in the world, to see what's really going on. They don't want that. They really don't. They have to keep you calm and complacent. So they try to keep you involved in whatever it is they're doing at the time, which isn't hard when they're always doing it, and they volunteer you for so many things. You can't say no. You can't. So, there's no vacations, there's no leaving, there's none of that. And I think that had something to do with why my dad left. You think that if you came across a cult, you would know it. You think that you would be able to tell if you were being brainwashed. You can't. And anybody that's ever been to church, one of the things that they actually teach you when you study religion in school is because I did go to a Christian school. I studied theology. I have a associate's degree in education, teaching, and which, can you see that? And a bachelor's degree in history, and part of that was in theology and religion, and the other part is history, just kind of general history, because who doesn't love history? Okay, I love history, whatever. And one of the things that we studied was the church's ability to manipulate you. And they all know this. Anybody that's gone through theological training, seminary, they all know this. In fact, they are taught this. Okay. You walk into a church, what is the first thing you see? A big room. You go into the sanctuary, you see a big room. Okay, it's got like 20-foot ceilings. It's like that to make you feel small. They put the preacher up really high, so he's above you. Following me? They use the warm, fuzzy music when it's right about time for you to give the offering. Now, there's a lot of manipulation that goes into a church service that people don't even really notice. It's the same thing like when you go to Walmart and they play the music over the sound system that makes you shop slower. They found a certain type of music that will cause you to shop slower and buy more and spend more. Church is the same thing. The offering, everything is all strategically placed within the service to cause the most giving. Because what are they there for? For the most part, they're there to make money. I'm not saying all churches do this. Okay, yeah, I'm saying all churches do this. I'm not saying all churches are there strictly to make money. The vast majority, I believe, are. Especially if they're on TV. Gonna leave that there. Gonna put it down. So, everyone who's been to church has been exposed to this type of brainwashing. It is just a fact. It is how it is. The cult believed that only the members of our little congregation were the ones to be saved, and we had to bring everybody. We had to poach them from all the other churches, because even the ones at the other churches weren't saved. Only our cult was saved. So, here's the thing. They're still really big on the sinner's prayer, right? I don't know if you know what the sinner's prayer is. If you haven't been around church, lucky you. It was a thing where at the end of a service, the preacher person invites the sinners in a group to come down in front of everybody, every head bowed and every eye closed. Because they got to accept Jesus in their heart. Bless your little heart. Here's the thing. The sinner's prayer is not in the Bible. Find it. I dare you. It's not in there. It was developed by a dude named Moody back in, I believe, the 1880s, when the first traveling preacher started out, kind of in the vein of the snake oil salesman. They would come into town and they were like, man, we're just not making a lot of money. They were like, oh, we gotta draw these crowds, like, we gotta get more people in. We need to make this money. So he developed something only he had. The sinner's prayer. Gotta have that sinner's prayer to get into heaven. That worked. They're still using it. To this day, they're still using it. Genius. Problem is, the cult did not believe that. They believed that you had to be part of our little cult to go to heaven. Okay? And like, if you had happened to die and you were still a member of the cult, but you happened to die and you had sinned. Let's say I had watched TV, or I listened to music, or I didn't do what my husband told me to do, or I wore something my husband didn't like, or I said something my husband didn't, whatever. Doesn't matter. You had any kind of sin, you weren't getting to heaven anyway. So you had to be perfect all the time. There was never a time when you could not be perfect. And I remember like my mom and these people telling me like, what would you do if Jesus came back right now? What would you do if you died right now? Which, you know, as a 6-year-old caused me to really think about suicide, considering the situation that I was in. I had been abused by a family member and a neighbor from the time I was 3 to 12, and off and on. So for them to tell me that, you know, that wasn't good for my psyche. And my grandma and my mom knew. They did nothing to stop it. In fact, they continued to force me to go over to that family member's house, even after they knew he admitted that he was doing it. I went to his funeral just to make sure he was dead. By their definition, I was a sinner. It didn't matter what I did. I was impure. I had been ruined. So it didn't matter what I did because I couldn't get into heaven anyway. And the way that they presented it to me, a 6-year-old should not be thinking about how to end their own lives. It just shouldn't happen. That was really hard to talk about. And this is actually the first time that I've said any of that out loud. I don't know how I feel about that. I've never said that before. I spend most of my time trying not to remember. And in fact, I don't remember a lot of my childhood. I remember kind of before I was 3 and after 14. Anything in the middle is fuzzy. And I remember the cult. When I was 14, we moved after my dad left. And that's when things got real bad. That's when we joined the cult. It was, you see, here's the thing. Let me teach you how churches work, okay? These churches in particular. They are part of, well, they claim to be part of the charismatic evangelical group, okay? Think Benny Hinn, the Name It, Claim It bunch, the televangelists, those guys, okay? They claim to be part of them. They claim to be part of this wider church, and reality, they're not. The church that I grew up in was bad. It wasn't as bad as the cult. I still call it a cult because it was. But when we moved when I was 14, that's when we joined that church. And that's when everything went to hell. That's where I was strip searched repeatedly. by the elders of the church looking for tattoos because they believed I was involved in a cult. If you can believe that. I guess they were jealous. I don't know. They were looking for... Anybody remember the Salem witch trials? They were looking for Satan's teat. Not even kidding. I wish to Satan I was. They really believed that. I was afraid that I was going to be burned at the stake at any moment for several years of my life. They would force me to teach classes I didn't want to. They would, just to keep me busy. Because if you know me, I ask a lot of questions. I am ridiculous with the questions. I am that 6-year-old kid that won't shut up and has to ask why. That's me. I never grew up. This is what happens. They got mad because I kept asking questions. Why can't women wear pants? Why can't I cut my hair? Why can't I wear makeup? Why do I have to do what you tell me? Why can't a woman have any place of power? Why can't a woman have any place of position? Why is a woman's place in the kitchen serving you? They didn't like that so much. I think that may be what helped draw me to the dark side very early on, was the overwhelming darkness that I had grown up with that continues even to this day, I think. Although I try to avoid it, I try to let it motivate me. I try to not let it overtake me. And that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm finally talking, because I know there are others out there. I know I'm not the only one. I know. I know. We have to start talking. We have to start telling these stories, because this cult still exists. These people are still around. This is not okay. They wanted to force me into an arranged marriage with someone who went to the church. I hated him. He had a secret girlfriend that only I knew about, and they would force us to hang out together, and she would come, and I was grateful to her. I wish I remembered her name. I would tell her thank you. They would force me to do manual labor, like laying carpet or fixing a floor or roofing, something like that, as punishment for whatever I had done. One time in particular, I was laying carpet with this boy who was older than me, about 3 or 4 years. He got mad because I did something wrong, I guess. He found some canned goods from the pantry, filled up a Walmart sack, and he beat me until I stopped moving. And then he kicked me to see if I was still breathing. I was forced to walk home as punishment. Maybe a mile. Wasn't that far. I told my mom. She said, sometimes we all have to take a beating. And I never forgot that. That's when I knew I had to leave. I was not going to let that happen. I knew I had to leave. It was shortly thereafter that they forced me to go to Jesus camp one more time. I didn't have a choice. They forced me to go, and they forced him to make sure I went. During Jesus camp, he beat me up in front of everybody. I'm a classically trained opera singer, mostly German. And if I decided that I didn't want to sing, I was beaten up. I didn't want to sing. Especially not for the Lord. So, in front of everybody, beat me up. Right there, in the square. Nobody cared. You know, nobody cared. That was the last time that she was able to make me go. I don't know how many times I was preached against because I had piercings. I had a nose ring. Not this one. Not even this. Like, it was just like a little tiny little nose ring. But they preached against me for weeks because I was going to hell for a nose ring. And never mind the fact that the pastor's wife is wearing giant gold hoop earrings and all the gold, you know, whatever. You know, the Bible doesn't differentiate between piercings, guys. Just saying. You know, you pierce your ears, you're going to hell just like me for having a nose ring. Okay? Just saying. You know, my mom decided she wanted to have the kids spend the night one night. I said, okay, fine. She had gotten in the shower. She gets out and she proceeds to tell them that Jesus spoke to her while she was in the shower. Yeah, Jesus spoke to her and told her that my boys were going to hell. Now, my boys, one is autistic, one at the time was profoundly autistic. The other has his own difficulties, which may or may not be on the ASD spectrum. They tested him and said that he was on the spectrum. So, but you wouldn't know it. You know, I've spent years working with them. And in fact, you know, my oldest went from being completely nonverbal to being normal. Relatively normal. You wouldn't know. So, at the time, he was profoundly autistic, and the only thing that he understood was video games. Computers. That was all. He would reprogram my computer at 3. I had to use a Linux system because he kept reprogramming it. It's crazy. He could beat any game in a matter of hours. Some games in a matter of minutes. It was ridiculous. He figured out how to call China one time. That was the worst phone bill I've ever had. So she tells them that in the shower, Jesus himself spoke to her and says that they are going to hell. And I, your princess of darkness, is leading them there by the hand. You never guess why. Guess why. Guess why. Please guess why. They play video games. Because their games are like a god to them. So they are going to hell. They were like 3 and 9 at the time. Going to hell. That's child abuse. If you know me, you know that I curse like a sailor. Like a very classy sailor, but a sailor nonetheless. I am holding that in for you right now. I didn't speak to her for a long time after that. In fact, well, I did one time when I yelled at her. And I used my best sailor impression to let her know how I felt about her and Jesus having a conversation about my children. And if it ever happened again, she would never see them. Ever. She didn't speak to me for a very long time after that, but honestly, that's not the first time she disowned me. That's probably about the 6th or 8th. So, whatever. I found out later that she had taken my children to the cult church. You know, whenever they were finally able to speak about it, later on, my boys were able to spend some time thinking about it and kind of reflecting on it. And after they had spent some time with Nana over the years, they kind of said, you know what? We get you. We understand you. We understand why you are the way you are, and it's fine with us because that's how you coped with it. That's how you got out of it, and that's fine. We understand. We get it. Because if it had been us, we would have murdered her in her sleep. You are far more patient than we are. Not kidding. So, I didn't want them to ever understand. I did not want them to ever be in a position to understand, but here we are. But on the other hand, I'm glad that they do, because they understand where I'm coming from now. And I have always given my boys a choice. I've taught them about every religion. Every religion. Any question they've had, I've answered it. I am not a person to force people into a decision. That's just not how I am, probably because of the cult. I am a person that gives options. Here are your options. Here's what they look like. Here's what the outcomes will look like. This is your choice. That's how I've always been. And I think it worked. The oldest is agnostic. The youngest is searching. But he's at that age that he's supposed to, so that's fine. Wherever his journey goes, we're good with that. We all know that there are certain things we don't tell Nana. Everything. And that's why I'm talking about it. These churches still exist. They're still out there. They're hiding in plain sight. Most churches have a government. I worked at a Presbyterian church. I was the office manager, and I met some amazing people, and I'm still friends with to this day. There are some really great people. One of my greatest teachers was the pastor there. She was the first female pastor I'd ever met, and she blew my mind. She opened my eyes to a lot of things, and convinced me to go back to school. She caused me to stop and question everything that I had ever thought. So thank you. I appreciate that. Even my boys won't accept any kind of Christian teaching if it isn't well thought out and exegised all to hell. If you don't know what an exegesis is, it's when you take a section of the Bible, say a verse even, and you look at it for the 6 different types of context, linguistic, historical, context within itself, context within the time that it was written, by whom it was written, for the people that it was written, and you look at each of the words, the usage, how it was used, why they chose each word that they did. Then you go back to the translations and you make sure that those translations are correct. You look at every word. And by the time you get finished with it, you have a greater understanding of what you're looking at and how to look at it in the right context. Context is everything. So if a preacher tries to come at them with anything and they haven't exercised the hell out of it, forget it. Even when they were 5 or 6 years old, they wouldn't accept it. That's why I was okay with that church because everything they did was just studied all to hell. Every angle, everything they did, they took it from a more historical kind of angle, I think. And it really changed my head because I was so used to having this preacher who basically got up and said whatever the hell he wanted. You know, women can no longer wear shoes, and suddenly it was the 11th commandment. That's how it was. He decides he wants to make a rule. He's making a rule. So I know that not every church is like that. I know that most churches have I know that the Presbyterian church had a governing body that would tell them what to do and make sure that no one was going off the rails. No one was teaching anything crazy. These churches, these evangelical churches, do not have such a governing body. They are allowed to say whatever they want. And that's why they're scary. Anything, be it government or an organization without oversight, is a monster. If it's not now, it will be. So you're looking for churches that have no oversight. And if they say they have the oversight, where is it? What do they control? What is the local governing body allowed to change? Are all people equal? If all people are not equal, run. It's probably a cult. If one group is, say, women are not allowed to do anything but teach children, they aren't allowed to be on the board of directors, run. It's probably a cult. If the pastor is calling himself doctor or bishop, and he doesn't have a degree, never went to seminary, and is not a doctor, run. It's probably a cult. If they want you to limit your life in any way, limit your friends, limit your ability to take in the world, be it through your family, through the internet, through TV, it's probably a cult. You should run. If there is any abuse of any kind, you need to call somebody. You need to call a helpline. Call 911. It doesn't matter. Call somebody, because guess what? If it's happening to you, it's happening to somebody else. I promise. There are so many red flags but I've learned that if your gut says this is bad, then this is bad. People don't wake up thinking they're in a cult. People don't wake up thinking that they're about to be abused. I know there's more of us out there. I know I'm not the only one. If you have any questions for part 4, send me a message. Catch you later.